My theme song for Mic Check, What's Going On? And there's so much going on in and around the world. And it leads us to our featured segment. It is now time for Mic Check, sparking global changes in and around the world. Well, this Saturday morning, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be having once again another thought-provoking conversation right here on Groovin Radio. A conversation that many folks don't want to have. A conversation that many folks don't want us to have. This conversation will surround the mental and emotional state of Jamaica. And you just heard Anthony Turner, as we mentioned, the killing of a journalist in Jamaica this past week, veteran Barbara Gale, who was brutally murdered. And we also take a look at the young man who committed that crime, and I am saying that he might be mentally unstable, ladies and gentlemen. And it leads me this morning to my very special guest. She is indeed a licensed professional counselor with a PhD in clinical psychology. Her name is Dr. Roxanne Richards, and she have now joined us, ladies and gentlemen, as we try to get a better control, a better look at mental health and emotional state of Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen. Is there a crisis there in Jamaica? I welcome Dr. Roxanne Richards. Good morning, Doc. How are you?
Good morning, Roxanne. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure. I'm doing pretty good, thanks.
How are you doing this Saturday morning? How are you dealing with the cold here in North America, Roxanne?
Oh, my goodness. It's horrible, but I'm learning to cope with it. You know, we have to learn to deal with it, keep ourselves warm and everything like that. But yeah, it's happening.
Indeed. You know, the conversation we're about to embark on, it's a very important conversation. And as I said before, many folks don't like to talk about this, mental health. Many folks don't like to talk about emotional health. Many folks don't even want to hear that you may need to go to therapy. But we're going to have this conversation this morning, Roxanne. And before I even dive into this conversation, why did you choose this kind of counseling as your profession? Why, Roxanne?
Okay, so Roxanne, it has been years for me in this particular profession. Of course, it started off early in my life where I felt like I found it comfort in helping others, and I saw where others confided in me from a very early age, and I just kind of felt really good to see them, get through and they progress well. And, it happened over time, and I felt like I needed to do something further with, actually helping people go through difficult circumstances because of those early experiences. And, of course, it led me further and further here and to do a lot more outreach work, helping those who are mentally challenged. So it has been from those early experiences and as a child growing up and observing as well my parents who were community advocates, and they served people, they helped people. So that was something that was almost natural to me.
You attended the University of the West Indies. You also attended A&M University for your clinical psychology training. You also attended at Astra. That is at Astra. Now, you going into this profession, were there anyone saying to you, Roxanne Richards, why deal with these kind of people? They're going to get help somewhere else. Did anyone ever try to deter you from your goal and your dreams?
Well, initially, there were some persons who perhaps said, hey, they don't feel like it's too much stress in this field, it's too difficult and dealing with the mentally challenged, especially those who are severely mentally challenged. Sometimes people did say things to me in terms of, their safety and things like that. But overall, people felt like, this is something that I was definitely passionate about, and an area that they saw me do, work that was successful. So, I did not have the majority of persons around me who were actually saying to me, no, this is not something you should do. They actually supported my journey through the mental health world.
When we talk about mental health, when we talk about emotional health, I want to bring bipolar into this too, because bipolar is kind of that emotional state that some people are in. Some people have bipolar and don't even know that they're bipolar because of the mere fact that the way they treat others. And I'm not an expert in this, but I'm now able, after doing all these programs on radio, I am now a little bit able to identify people who are narcissists, people who are bipolar, people who have mental disorder. In Jamaica, Dr. Roxanne Richards, how is it in terms of diagnosing folks with mental illness? How is it like there?
Well, based on my early experiences there and my observation, it has been a challenge. Because early diagnosis does not really take place, and because of that, it impacts just in preventing severe consequences for people who are struggling with mental illnesses. And as you rightly mentioned, there are several persons who have these diagnoses. They're walking around, they're interacting with people. People do know that there's something wrong, and even within themselves, those who struggle with these conditions, sometimes they do know something is wrong, but for others, they have poor insight to their behaviors, especially if it's a personality disorder. So you do have a large majority of persons who have untreated mental health conditions, and it has been a struggle. It has been a challenge for us over the years. So it's, yes. Absolutely.
You keep using the word challenge. I know it must be very challenging in Jamaica. And I say that, Roxanne, because when you look at inner cities in Jamaica, when you look at some of these horrific crimes that these youngsters have to deal with in Jamaica, and yes, crime happens everywhere. We deal with them here also. But there's a huge difference. Like, for instance, Monday we saw another school shooting here in these United States, in Wisconsin. But before the day was over, you heard about counselors being put in place, and whatever kind of help the students will need and the teachers will need, and also the police officers and all those who responded will need. You see that go in place immediately. In Jamaica, though, it's a different situation, because it seems to me, when you look at the garrison communities in Jamaica, and not only garrisons, but when you look at communities in Jamaica, and when these horrific crimes take place, these people just don't get no help. And I am now saying to myself, have they grown immune to the situation? Have you ever looked at it that way, Roxanne?
Yeah. Well, absolutely, Rasclam. It is, something that's really heartbreaking. Sometimes just to look and to see the situation that we have in our country. And we know that even looking at some of the stats, in last year alone, we were among the highest homicide rates among 20, Latin American and Caribbean countries. And, that's really sad to see. But I know one of the things that it's a problem is that, as you say, we become so insensitive to what's going on. It's almost like we're immune to things.
Yes.
It's almost like the order of the day, in other words. And so you find that people have these untreated traumas. They have things that they've seen and heard, just witnessing vicious criminal activities and things like these. People are actually traumatized, and they're living in fear. There's much anxiety.
Yes. And
that is something that has been, on the inside for many, and they never get the opportunity to actually sit and process some of these disturbances that they've had. But in fact, there's a saying that goes, if trauma is not dealt with, then, trauma is going to deal with you. So,
Yes.
it comes out, it's going to play out in other ways if it's not actually addressed. And that's a challenge, or again, using the word challenge, but something that we have, we are struggling with our own sweet country, over the years. And it's really sad to see some of these things happen. And, there's really not a lot of intentional work in that area.
You mentioned anxiety and you mentioned stress. And we're going to pick up on anxiety and stress later on in this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Groovin Radio right here on Irie Jam Radio. We are in our featured segment. It is called Mic Check, Sparking Global Changes. And we are seeing how we can make a change when it comes to mental health, emotional health in Jamaica. It is very, very challenging, ladies and gentlemen. My very, very special guest this Saturday morning, her name is Dr. Roxanne Richards. She is a clinical psychologist, ladies and gentlemen. Over 20 years of experience in this field, ladies and gentlemen. Roxanne, you look at schools in Jamaica. And children go to school in Jamaica, and sometimes they're spaced out, and they will get sent to the guidance counselor's office. I often say in Jamaica, our guidance counselors are not equipped with all the tools in the toolbox to even deal with these children. Moreover, to even figure out what's going on with these children. That kind of situation with our youngsters in Jamaica. The future, because the children are the future. What did you notice growing up in Jamaica and starting your profession in Jamaica in this field? What did you notice in that era I just mentioned in terms of schools and guidance counselors and youngsters?
Yes, Roxanne, definitely an interesting observation, and we've had maybe over time guidance counselors in schools. And I started off in the schools as well, working as a counselor, and sometimes it has been overwhelming. There's, we're under-resourced, and you have several, cases to deal with, but sometimes the guidance counselors, they were asked to do things that they had to teach. So I felt like there wasn't that clear understanding of the role of a counselor, and so that took away from just, spending quality time and really serving, the younger generation. So, that in itself was really an issue, a challenge, and some of the training, I think just sometimes early diagnosis and the treatment of persons with mental illness, that's really crucial for preventing severe consequences. And that's one of the major problems, that we weren't necessarily fully equipped. I know much work has been done since I've left there, and but we still need a lot more in terms of equipping persons to fully and accurately assess persons who have, and very early too. It has to be early to make a big difference to in that particular area. So yes, still a lot of work to be done, and wider educational outreach programs have to take place. How
critical do you think it is in Jamaica in terms of mental health and emotional health? Because and I have a friend who, her only son, Ailey Clarkin, and she started a foundation. Her only son, Ailey Clarkin, was actually murdered in Jamaica. A brilliant young man who went to school in Canada and had gone back to Jamaica, was a teacher, and he was brutally murdered. I think it was 7 years ago, and the folks who killed him just actually got sentenced this year. He suffered from bipolar, and it leads me now to ask the question: how critical of an issue you think, and how severe of an issue you think mental health and emotional health is in Jamaica?
Well, definitely one affects the other. Where we if we're not treating our emotional condition or mental health is affected. And if we have these symptoms, they tend to worsen if they're untreated over time. It will definitely impact the quality of life that we have. We're, walking around persons who have these conditions, for example, as you mentioned, the bipolar or even depression, and it's going to ultimately affect their relationships and also their work life and, their goals. So it's, in the long run, these conditions, whether it be emotional or it's going to impact our mental health, and it's going to reduce the quality of our lives, and the productivity of a nation is going to be affected because of the increase in untreated mental health conditions.
Earlier on, you mentioned murders in Jamaica, and you mentioned how murderous of a country Jamaica is. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, since 2017, Jamaica has been ranked in the top 5. Furthermore, sometime in the top 3 per capita as one of the most murderous country in the world. Jamaica has been ranked in the top 10 in terms of one of the most corrupted country in the world. And it brings me to this. There are so many children in Jamaica who are going missing, who have gone missing. There are so many children in Jamaica, both boys and girls, who are being abused. There's so many people in Jamaica who have been abused. And there's so many people who have covered up their abuse. And there's so many people who are still living the legacy of those abused, to the point where some of these men and some of these women cannot even have a good relationship, because the individual that they're with today, they're the ones who are taking the blunt of their abuse that they got in the past. Have you ever sit down, Dr. Roxanne Richards, and take a look at the society and say to yourself, I wonder how many people here have gone through some kind of abuse? Have you ever done that?
Yes. Well, yes, definitely. I've thought about these conditions, coupled with several other things. And, it really goes on. The conversation goes on and has been for quite a long time of just these untreated traumas. Because, as you mentioned, we have a lot of persons who have been victims of abuse in our nation. And I guess the problem and challenge with it is that there is still not a lot of, accountability or regulation surrounding persons who have been victimized or the victims of the situations. So we really have been having these challenges over time, and it's definitely heart-rending to see all of these things happening especially with our people being traumatized and victimized over time, and nothing, no accountability.
One of the things that I recognize from a very, very young age is how many high school girls or how many young girls in Jamaica are being abused. And I remember going to high school in Jamaica and seeing these grown men will pick up these schoolgirls, and you just can't imagine what they have done to them. And some of them has fallen into the trap because the fact that they're financially challenged, and their parents at times sometimes knows about these situations and allow it to happen. I went to school with a young lady who got murdered in a movie theater in Jamaica, and she was having a relationship with a grown man, and another individual who I guess was in love with her got into some jealous rage, and somehow she was murdered. And again, I can't imagine how many grown women today, how many grown men today who have been abused and have never ever tried to deal with their trauma to the point where it's affecting their social life today. Huh?
Yes.
There's also a situation that happened here in the United States, and it happened in the sports of gymnastics. and the gentleman who abused these young gymnasts, I think his name was Larry Nasser. He's now serving a lengthy prison sentence. How many of our youngsters in sports in Jamaica, both boys and girls, are being abused and being traumatized, and these situations are not being dealt with? So the criticalness of this, the importance of this, it is so important that we've tried to find out and figure out a way how to get to these folks, huh?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's really disturbing sometimes when you think about sometimes the things that we've encountered over time, and millions of persons who have gone through these situations where they're actually victimized, and they're still living in these traumas, and they're not really addressed. And, we don't necessarily want our nation to continue and persons believing that this is the order of the day, this is the norm, it happens, you just kind of move on, find a way to deal with it.
Right.
Because, and I think this is, one of the reasons we're having these kinds of conversations.
Right.
We really want to see change. We want to see things move in a different directions and break down some of the stigmas, especially related to abuse. If abuse is just seen as, it happens. The woman, it happens, it's a norm, or, you can't speak about it anymore. It's several years, and there's really no help for that individual, then we know that it's something that we definitely have to change.
How high you think the cover-up is, Dr. Roxanne Richards? How high you think the cover-up is when it comes to the abuse that people have gone through, the abuse that people are going through? There's so many women who stays in abusive relationship, and they stay there for various reasons. Some will tell you that I have to stay because this is the only place I can eat. This is the only place my children will be able to go to school, and they stay there, and they get abused. But then later on in life, they flip the switch, and they become the abuser. How much you think this is?
And this is Roxanne, this is an unfortunate cycle for a lot of persons. They live it, and sometimes you think because they've experienced it, they will not in turn be the abusers. But you do have some persons who end up being abusive after they've lived through those difficult and challenging experiences. So it's something that's ongoing, and you do have also a large percentage of women who have been living through abuse, and it happens everywhere. But it's definitely something that we've grown to see a lot in our nation as well, where persons, they're subjected to a lot of emotional and physical abuse, and they tend to just remain in it just because, they might think that there's nothing that will come out of this, or the fact that, hey, this is their only way, their only means to survival. It is a common story over time in terms of the things that I've experienced over time in my nation and seen as well. So it's definitely something that's a difficult thing to even think about.
Dr. Roxanne Richards, some children, and because of the way we were brought up in Jamaica, little children must be seen, little boys and little girls must be seen, but not be heard. A lot of times when these youngsters are being abused, they don't say anything because grown folks at times don't believe them. And do you think there's a cover-up, that's a very serious cover-up pattern that we have grown up with in Jamaica? And how bad do you think that is?
It's definitely it's a horrible pattern that we've seen over time in our country. People do not want us, as children, they're going to cover up things like that if it means because they don't want, the family to be disrupted or this story to go out into the community. So people do cover up some of these things, and it's not easily in first world countries it's really something that people do not take lightly. It's addressed immediately. It's so we children are definitely protected, I think, a lot more. But it's again something that we have been trying to work on, and there's a lot more room for improvement. And I think it goes back to just training and regulation, and just actually enforcing certain things. So it's not that the laws are not there, but we want to be able to enforce some of these laws and really learn to, accurately, see things like diagnosed persons, see them quickly for their dispositions. If they're abused, the guidance counselors can see these things quickly and they address it. So it's not left up to a minor only to really, speak up, because they might be living in fear. And, so if they're supported by a trained team, then, it becomes easier for these things not to happen.
Is it easy for people who grew up in abusive situation to become abusers? Do you think that's an easy thing because they have internalized it so much and they have never dealt with it? Do you think that's easy?
I would say that it can happen. As I mentioned earlier, there are some persons who are victimized. They do in turn actually victimize others. And there's also that saying that says hurt people.
Yes.
They do not deal with the traumas. They do not deal with the cycles and patterns that they have over time, especially with their experiences and maybe their family life.
It's Irie Jam Radio, WQHT 97.1 FM, HD3.
Traumas, so they take these out on their own families, and it's certainly, it's an obvious pattern that we see that's going on as well.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Groovin Radio right here on Irie Jam Radio. We are at the top of the 11 o'clock hour, and we are in our featured segment. But before I go any further, station ID, ladies and gentlemen.
Sing it. Tyrus Riley representing for Groovin Radio, All girls who are tight and all man go on, bless up. I'm a grooving, listening to Groovin Radio. Come on, man.
It's all about Groovin Radio. Number one station, Albaro's listening. Fire can't cool this, your fire can't tame. Yo, freedom on fire.
Blessed love, this is Dwayne Stevenson from Augustown, and you're in tune to Russ Clem on Groovin Radio. Keep it moving every time, so yes.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you're locked in to Groovin Radio right here on Irie Jam Radio. Again, we are in our featured segment. It is called Mic Check, as we take a very serious look, ladies and gentlemen, at the severity of mental health, emotional health in Jamaica, bipolar, and why is it folks don't try and go and get treatment? Earlier on, I said I want to take a look at anxiety and I want to take a look at stress, because all of this is connected, Dr. Richards. And my special guest, ladies and gentlemen, her name is Dr. Roxanne Richards. She is indeed a professional, a licensed professional counselor with over 20 years of experience, ladies and gentlemen. She has a PhD in clinical psychology, and I'm talking to her just this thought-provoking conversation. We must have it, Roxanne. We must have this. No. People tend to get stressed out sometime, and then it puts them in a very emotional space. And I'll tell you how easily you can get stressed out. Have a sickness that the doctor, you walk into your doctor's office and the doctor says, hey, Ras Clem, you have cancer. Roxanne, you have breast cancer. And that will put you in a very different space. Now, it brings stress. And they say stress kills. You get very anxious. There's a lot of people walking around fully stressed out and fully anxious. Fully have this anxiety issue. I mean, how do you deal with those folks, Roxanne?
Okay. All right. So definitely interesting question. Yeah, several people do suffer from anxiety and stress, and stresses come from so many different factors, and one that you mentioned, just hearing bad reports as it relates to your health. But the most important thing is for you to kind of get the support that you need while you have a health condition, or sometimes it's just the anxiety related to thinking that the worst is going to happen. Sometimes people do get reports, and they are so overwhelmed with what the possibilities are that they end up extremely anxious and they get very stressed out. So this is why a very confidential space is important, where you could actually express your deeper emotions, because sometimes you might not find someone within your circle that you could confidentially state, who is objective, who is non-judgmental, who you could actually express those concerns. They might even say to you something. If you say to a family member or somebody who is not trained, they will say something to make the matter worse.
Yes.
So it's very important that you find your space and a confidential trained person who you could actually talk things through. And for persons dealing with that, I would have to, first of all, work with their concerns and allow them to process safely. And then I will also help them to incorporate certain skills or some tools that can help them work through what they're going through. So, setting goals with my clients is key, and just helping them to feel safe enough to process their concerns and discussing, perhaps alternative things that they could do to make the situation better.
Roxanne, I'm going to share 2 stories with you. And I have learned from these 2 stories of not to share certain things with people. I have a very, one of my schoolmates that I went to high school with, her sister, she posted something on social media recently. She had set up a GoFundMe for her sister who was suffering from breast cancer. And the day after she set up that GoFundMe account and placed it on Facebook, her sister died the next day. And she was devastated. And then that next day, that same Sunday, I was coming from church, and I called a very good friend of mine who I knew was diagnosed with breast cancer 3 years ago. And as I talked to her, she said to me, she got silent, she got quiet. And she said to me, Rasclem, there is something I want to share with you. And I haven't shared with many people. And I said, why? She said, because of what happened the last time. She was diagnosed 3 years ago. She got treatment, she got treated. And lo and behold, the cancer went into remission, which was good. But then, this past June, the cancer came back. And this time, it came back in a very aggressive way. To the point where she said to me, Rasclem, I am doing this aggressive chemotherapy, and I'm going to have to remove both my breasts after chemotherapy. And I said, wow. So how are you feeling? She says, not well, but I'm holding on. I'm holding the faith. And I said, you have now made a choice not to share this with many people. And I said, why? And she said to me, because of what happened the last time, a lot of folks felt that I was looking for sympathy. And I felt so hurt because they just don't know what I was going through and what I'm going through. And I'd share with her my 2 brothers who passed away from some form of cancer. And I said to her, it's a very nerve-wracking situation. It's a very nerve-wracking situation. And you have to be so careful who you share these things with. Because there are folks out there who are just looking to spread your information. And then there are folks out there who will get distance from you and don't talk to you. And when someone could look at you and says, you're not the first one to have breast cancer, or you're not the first one to have that cancer, get over it. Do you know what that does to someone? It eats them. It tears them apart, Roxanne. And it brings me to this now, where folks are afraid of even going to therapy. But why so? Because therapy is supposed to be that safe haven, right?
Yeah.
Why are folks so afraid of going and seeking help? Is it because we grew up in a society where if I'm going through something and I tell you that I'm going to therapy, you're going to say I'm a madman? Is that the reason why?
That's very a very interesting topic there, as you mentioned, Rascalem, and just people having these serious issues, real personal issues, and just kind of having that fear too. When you mentioned, your friend, she didn't want to say this. She didn't want to do the same thing again because she knew how persons might respond. Obviously, they did not, in the first instance, respond in a way that gave her any form of support. This is definitely, this is a problem over time if somebody faces those kinds of, really serious and intimate issues. You have to be so careful how and who you say things to, and as you mentioned earlier as well, you having persons around you who that they might just go and they're going to spread it, and people are looking for opportunities to highlight somebody's concern, and it breaks them down even more to know that their issues are being spread, and people are discussing something personal and confidential. So this brings a lot of fear to someone who is thinking whether or not am I really supposed to sit in front of a therapist with these issues. Is this gonna really and truly be confidential? It causes some hesitation, it causes some fear, and definitely worry for someone to make that decision. But it's absolutely it's normal to feel that way if you've had these kinds of experiences. It's normal. So, but you want to make sure that you actually.
Doc, I think I've lost Dr. Roxanne Richards, ladies and gentlemen. So let me do this. Let me go and find Roxanne again and bring her back. You're listening to Groovin Radio, ladies and gentlemen. We are in our featured segment. It is
and it's not going to be spread.
Right. There's a HIPAA law here in the United States that if you tell someone something, especially if you go to your job or you go to your school or whatever, and even a friend, if you share that information with someone, they should not reshare it. It should be a confidential situation. And I'll tell you this. One of my brother, Winston, who passed away last year, he had two forms of cancer. He had bone cancer and he had prostate cancer. And he kept it away from us, even his family. It was only 2 weeks before he passed away that I knew the severity of his sickness. And his wife, who's a nurse, said to me that she has oftentimes asked him to share the information with us because it would be very helpful to us. It would be very helpful to me as his brother, and it would be very helpful to his one sister. And he kept it away for whatever reason. And I can also tell you this, that when I saw him, when I saw a photo of him 2 weeks before he passed away, and I saw him when he died, it actually put me in a very, very sad state, and it put me in an area where I did not want to go, but again I had to deal with it, and I had to deal with my own personal feelings and personal issues when it comes to that. So folks, you must go and seek help. You must go and find help. Help is not in the barbershop. Help is not in the beauty salon. Help is not even in your workplace unless there are trained people there who can actually assist you and help you. If you're going through something, make sure, please make sure you go and find the necessary help that you need. I learned something this morning from you. If you don't deal with trauma, trauma will deal with you. Trauma will get you. So you better make sure that if you were ever traumatized, if you were ever abused, please find a way to talk about it. Find a way to get help. Because one thing I've also learned, Dr. Roxanne Richards, is that an abuser, if they share their story with another abuser, they become friends because they think that, you know, it is so funny because this abuser sympathizes for the next abuser. And that next abuser sympathizes for the other abuser. And none of them ever get help. None of them ever get help because they confide in each other. And they think that is a good thing to do. That is one of the worst things you can ever do because you're not a professional, the other person is not a professional, and you both need to go and seek professional help. Agree or disagree?
Yes, absolutely. So sometimes people are not helping each other in any way. They actually make situations worse.
Indeed.
Especially with untreated mental health condition, it has severe consequences. So, you know, as you mentioned, it's important to seek and get professional support.
Indeed.
If you want to live a meaningful life.
Before we go this morning, Doc, what do you think they need to do in Jamaica? What do you think we need to do in Jamaica to curb the situation? Because when you look at the kind of crimes that have happened in Jamaica, and I'm sticking with crimes here because since 1979, on average, 1,000 people is murdered every year. Since 1979, Jamaica is a small place. When you look at the amount of crime that has taken place in Jamaica in front of people, in front of the general public, in front of children, what do you think we need to do in Jamaica to actually deal with this situation a little bit better?
Yes, Roxanne, it's a lot. It's definitely it's not a cookie cutter approach with our country, and knowing the different kinds of factors that affects crime and violence, and we want to make sure that we collaborate and we're working together in unity. It starts with leadership, it starts with government, and it also impacts our educational system, and also actually doing a lot more outreach and, you know, really teaching people and breaking down stigmas as it relates to crime and as it relates to mental health. So, you know, it's a collaborative approach, and we have to really come together, and we have to be forceful, and we have to also decide that this is not what we want for our nation. We do not want our nation to continue to be challenged by crime, and crime actually we don't want to be. We are such a wonderful country. We have so many, you know, beauties about us, and we want these things to be showcased. We don't want to hear that we are top of the list with the homicide rate or anything like that. So there has to be training and retraining, especially with law enforcement and those in government and leadership. There has to be support for the young people. There has to be a lot of interventions going into the schools, and it has to be active, it has to be consistent. And it also involves these conversations that we're having, where people are free to talk about things like these, and they're thinking ways, they're trying to create ways of actually improving or correcting the issues, the deep-rooted issues that we have as well. So it's definitely a collaborative approach to this issue.
You know, Dr. Roxanne Richards, I do hope that this Saturday morning we were able to connect and we were able to touch the lives of many folks out there listening to us. I do hope that folks out there listening to us in this knowledge room can now go and will now go and seek the proper help that they need. You know, the stigma that is attached to someone when they go and seek professional help, when they go and get therapy, that stigma of labeling that person as being crazy, as being weak, labeling that person in a very negative way is the worst thing that you can ever do, folks. Be supportive of someone. You just never know what that individual has gone through. You just never know what Roxanne is going through today. You don't know what Iras Clem is going through today. So sometimes we're down, sometimes we're up, but I am asking you folks, please, I am pleading, if you are going through an abusive situation, get some help. If you have ever been through an abusive situation, get some help, because that abuse is going to come back and get you. That abuse is going to come back and hurt you, and you're going to internally turn around and hurt someone else. You're going to become an abuser, because if you, the abuser, has never been treated, you know nothing else away from abusing someone else, because you think you're doing the right thing. And I've learned these things, Dr. Roxanne Richards, because I've been there, done that, and I now want to help others. And like I say, my good friend Lilith Clarkin, her son Eli Clarkin was murdered in Jamaica only because he suffered from bipolar and they misunderstood who he was and they killed him. So she went out and she started her own foundation to deal with bipolar in Jamaica and beyond. I'm going to ask you for a closing statement and we will end on that note. Go ahead.
Yes, Roxanne. So thanks for this intimate conversation and for sharing those experiences as well. And I must say that, this, moves us to having a lot more of these conversations. Let's do it together, everyone. Let's work together and make sure that you're taking care of yourself, your own mental health, and encouraging those persons around you to do the same. Let's work together in partnership and make a difference. If you have knowledge, let's share it. If it can change the situation in our nation. Our nation is too beautiful to for some of the things that we are seeing and experiencing daily, but we can make a difference, and we're moving forward to make a difference with these conversations, and especially as it relates to our mental health.
Indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, that was my very, very special guest this morning, Dr. Roxanne Richards. She has over 20 years of professional experience. She is a licensed professional counselor with a PhD in clinical psychology. I thank you so much, Roxanne, for joining the Groovin Radio experience this Saturday morning. I hope it was worth your while.
Thanks, Roxanne. It was great being here. Thanks for having me. It was indeed a pleasure.
Indeed. Come again. Don't be a stranger now. Okay?
I will.
One love, okay. Roxanne. We'll talk later on today.
All right. Take care now.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our featured segment right here on Groovin Radio. Mic check, sparking global changes. The change that we try to spark this morning is mental health, emotional health in Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope that we were able to connect and touch with you this morning. I'm going to take a musical break and then a short commercial break. And then when we come back, we will wrap our Groovin Radio's presentation this morning. Another brand new song from the boss, Barry.